The scorching Arizona sun beat down on the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Elias Ainsworth adjusted his worn leather hat, squinting against the harsh light. It was 1876, and the small frontier town was bustling with the usual afternoon activities, until a flash of burgundy fabric caught his eye. A woman in a fine dress swayed precariously before crumpling to the ground in front of Haggerty's general store. Without hesitation, Elias sprinted across the street, dust kicking up from his boots as he reached her side. The woman's eyes fluttered open as he knelt beside her, her honey-brown hair coming loose from its careful arrangement. When she registered his face, something like recognition passed through her features. "You're not falling again," Elias said with a wry smile, his voice carrying a note of familiarity that surprised even him. Sophia Calloway blinked up at the rugged cowboy hovering over her, mortification coloring her cheeks. "I assure you, sir, I do not make a habit of collapsing in public thoroughfares." Yet as their eyes met, a jolt of recognition passed between them. 6 months earlier, during her first day in Redemption Creek, she had fainted from the brutal heat, and the same cowboy had come to her rescue. "We've got to stop meeting like this, Miss Calloway," Elias said, offering her his calloused hand. "Folks will talk." Sophia accepted his help, rising unsteadily to her feet. "I haven't eaten today," she admitted. "The school board meeting ran long and then Mrs. Pendleton needed help with." "Seems to me the new schoolteacher ought to know better than to skip meals in this heat," Elias interrupted, his tone gentle despite the reprimand. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." "I couldn't possibly impose," Sophia protested, though she swayed slightly where she stood. "It's not an imposition if I'm offering." Elias kept a steadying hand at her elbow. "Besides, my brother owns the cafe across the way. He owes me a favor or two." Sophia hesitated, aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. A proper lady didn't dine alone with a man she barely knew. But propriety seemed less important than the alarming way the world tilted when she tried to take a step unassisted. "Very well, Mr. Ainsworth. Thank you." Elias guided her across the street to a modest building with a hand-painted sign reading Ainsworth's Cafe. Inside, the cool air was a blessed relief from the punishing heat. "Eddie," Elias called to a man behind the counter who shared his strong jawline and dark hair, "the schoolteacher needs some sustenance." Edward Ainsworth looked up from the ledger he was examining, his eyebrows rising at the sight of Sophia on his brother's arm. "Miss Calloway," he said with a polite nod. "Please, sit anywhere you like." As Elias led her to a corner table, Sophia became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. "I must look a fright," she murmured, attempting to tuck stray tendrils of hair back into place. "You look like someone who works too hard," Elias replied candidly. "Teaching 30 children of all ages can't be easy." Sophia was surprised by his observation. "You've counted my pupils." A hint of color touched Elias's tan cheeks. "My niece Clara speaks highly of you. She's in your class." "Clara Ainsworth," Sophia said with a genuine smile. "She's exceptionally bright. Her essays are always thoughtful." Edward approached with a tray bearing 2 glasses of lemonade, a plate of biscuits, and slices of roast beef. "On the house for our dedicated teacher," he said with a wink at his brother. Once they were alone again, Sophia took a grateful sip of lemonade, feeling strength return to her limbs. "I didn't properly thank you for helping me, both times." Elias waved away her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "Perhaps," she said, "but it was you who did." She studied him more carefully. Though his clothes were dusty from the trail, they were neat. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but his dark eyes were kind. He wasn't what she had expected from the cowboys who passed through town, often rowdy and looking for trouble. "What brings you to Redemption Creek, Mr. Ainsworth? Besides your brother's establishment, of course." Elias cut into his beef. "I've got land about 10 miles north, raising cattle, training horses. Nothing grand, but it's mine. You don't strike me as a drifter." "Used to be," he admitted. "Rode with the cattle drives up from Texas for years." But a man gets tired of sleeping under the stars every night. Sophia nodded. I understand the desire for roots. After my father passed, I spent 2 years as a governess in Boston, different house every few months. I came west for permanence as much as adventure. And how do you find our little corner of the territory? Elias asked. Hot, she said with a small laugh. But the people are kind. The children eager to learn. It feels possible here, possible to build something real. She looked down at her plate, suddenly embarrassed by her candor with a near stranger. Elias seemed to understand her reticence. Redemption Creek has a way of growing on you, even with all its rough edges. They finished their meal with comfortable conversation about the town, the weather, and Clara's progress in school. By the time they emerged from the cafe, Sophia felt restored, both by the food and by Elias's easy company. Thank you for the meal, she said as they stood on the boardwalk. And for coming to my rescue, again. My pleasure, Miss Calloway. He hesitated, then added, maybe next time we could meet without you fainting first. Sophia felt her cheeks warm, and it had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. I'd like that, Mr. Ainsworth. Elias, he corrected. Sophia, she offered in return. With a tip of his hat, he left her at the door to the millinery shop where she had rooms on the second floor. As she watched him walk away, Sophia found herself hoping their paths would cross again soon, preferably, with her remaining conscious for the entire encounter. The following Saturday, Sophia was organizing books in the one-room schoolhouse when a knock at the open door startled her. Elias stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Mr. Ainsworth, she said, unable to suppress her smile, this is a surprise. Miss Calloway. He stepped inside, glancing around at the neat rows of desks. I was passing by and saw the door open. Thought I'd check if you were in need of assistance. Sophia regarded him with amusement. The schoolhouse was well off his route to anywhere. As it happens, I could use some help reaching the top shelves, if you don't mind, of course. For the next hour they worked together, arranging books and supplies for the coming week. Elias proved to be both capable and surprisingly knowledgeable about literature. You've read Dickens? Sophia asked, impressed when he commented on Oliver Twist. Not much else to do during the long winters, he replied. My mother insisted we all be educated, even out here. As they worked, Sophia learned more about him. His parents had been among the first settlers in the area 15 years ago. His father had died in an Apache raid when Elias was 17, leaving him, his older brother Edward, and their mother to fend for themselves. After ensuring they were established, Elias had spent years on the trail, sending money home before returning to claim his own land 2 years prior. And you, he asked. What brought a Boston governess all the way to Arizona territory? Sophia hesitated. An advertisement in a newspaper. The town council was seeking a teacher. I had the qualifications and I wanted. She trailed off. A fresh start, Elias suggested. She nodded. My father was a professor at a ladies' seminary. After he died, there were debts. The position of governess was respectable, but I was always an outsider in those households. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in a growing community, it seemed like an opportunity to belong somewhere. And do you belong here? Sophia considered his question. I'm beginning to think I might. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Elias cleared his throat and reached for another stack of books. These need to go up top, he asked. Yes, thank you. As they continued working, their conversation flowed easily from books to the town's history to Elias's horses. When they finished, Sophia was reluctant to see him go. Would you care to join me for lunch? She asked impulsively. I brought sandwiches, nothing fancy but enough to share. Elias accepted, and they sat on the schoolhouse steps, eating ham sandwiches and watching hawks circle in the clear blue sky. When it was time for him to leave, he hesitated. There's a social at the church next Friday evening, he said. Would you consider attending with me? Sophia's heart quickened. I would be delighted, Elias. His smile made her breath catch. I'll call for you at 6 then. For the entire next week, Sophia found herself distracted during lessons, her mind wandering to thoughts of Elias and their upcoming evening together. The older girls noticed her preoccupation and exchanged knowing glances when she accidentally referred to President Grant as President Washington. Friday evening arrived with agonizing slowness. Sophia dressed with care in her best blue dress, which she had refreshed with new lace at the collar and cuffs. Her landlady, Mrs. Finch, raised her eyebrows when Sophia mentioned who her escort would be. "Elias Ainsworth is a good man," the older woman said. "Steady. Not like some of these cowboys who blow through town. His ranch is coming along nicely from what I hear." "We're just attending a church social," Sophia protested, though her flushed cheeks belied her casual tone. "Of course," Mrs. Finch replied with a knowing smile. "Just like my Henry and I were just dancing at the Harvest Festival 40 years ago." When Elias arrived, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his best vest, Sophia momentarily forgot how to breathe. He looked different away from the trail dust and working clothes, no less masculine but more polished. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She took the arm he offered, hyper-aware of his solid presence beside her. The church social was lively, with most of the town in attendance. A trio of musicians played fiddle, banjo, and piano while children darted between groups of conversing adults. Sophia introduced Elias to her fellow teachers and some of the parents she knew well. He, in turn, introduced her to ranchers and merchants she hadn't yet met in her 6 months in town. "Care to dance?" he asked when the musicians struck up a waltz. Sophia hesitated only briefly. "I'd love to." His hand at her waist was respectful but firm as he guided her around the floor with surprising grace. "Where did a cowboy learn to waltz?" she teased. "My mother," he replied. She insisted that being on the frontier was no excuse for being uncivilized. "Edward and I had dancing lessons every Sunday after church." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. His expression turned somber. "We lost her to influenza 3 years ago." Sophia squeezed his hand gently. "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," he said after a moment. Strong, educated women were her favorite kind of people. The compliment warmed her more than it probably should have. As they continued to dance, Sophia became aware of curious glances from the townspeople. The schoolteacher and the rancher. She could almost hear the whispers. Later, as they walked back to her lodgings under a canopy of stars, Elias seemed lost in thought. "Is something troubling you?" she asked. He slowed his pace. "I'm not much for town gossip, but I should warn you being seen with me might raise some eyebrows." "Because you're a rancher and I'm a teacher?" Elias shook his head. "Because of my mother." Sophia waited for him to continue. "She was half Apache," he said quietly. "My grandmother was captured as a young woman but eventually chose to stay with the man who had taken her. My grandfather, it wasn't a common story." Understanding dawned on Sophia, and people here know this. Some do, those who have been here long enough. "It hasn't caused trouble for a while, but—" He looked at her directly. "A schoolteacher is held to different standards." Sophia considered his words. Back east, such a connection would indeed have been scandalous. Even here, where relations between settlers and Native Americans remained complex and often hostile, it could affect how some parents viewed her influence over their children. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "But I form my own opinions of people based on their character, not their bloodline." Relief softened his features. "Not everyone is so open-minded." "Perhaps not," she agreed. "But those who matter will be." They had reached her door. In the silver moonlight, Elias's face was a study in contrast, strong lines and gentle eyes. He took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and thrilling. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Elias." Inside her room, Sophia stood by the window, watching his figure disappear down the street. She touched the spot on her hand where his lips had been, feeling like a character in one of the romance novels she secretly enjoyed. Except this wasn't fiction, and the flutter in her chest was all too real. Spring turned to early summer, and Elias became a regular visitor to the schoolhouse. Sometimes he brought Clara with him on Saturdays, and the three of them would share a picnic by the creek. Other times, he came alone, helping Sophia with repairs to the building or simply keeping her company while she graded papers. Their relationship progressed with the careful deliberation of two people who had learned that life offered few guarantees. Each shared confidence, each revealed vulnerability, was a step toward something neither dared name yet. On a particularly hot June day, Elias invited Sophia to see his ranch. Edward agreed to chaperone, bringing his daughter Clara along for propriety's sake. The little girl chattered excitedly during the wagon ride, pointing out landmarks and wildflowers. Elias's ranch was modest but well tended. The main house was small but solidly built, with a wide porch and curtains at the windows. A barn, corral, and bunkhouse for his two hired hands completed the primary structures. Behind the house, a vegetable garden flourished under the care of Mrs. Rodriguez, an older Mexican woman who cooked and kept house for Elias. "It's lovely," Sophia said sincerely as he showed her around. She could see the care that had gone into every aspect of the place, the attention to detail that spoke of permanence and pride. "It's still a work in progress," Elias replied, but his eyes shone with pleasure at her approval. After a tour of the property, they enjoyed a meal on the porch. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared a feast of stewed beef, beans, fresh bread, and apple pie. Clara regaled them with stories from school, while Edward teased his brother about the new curtains in the parlor. "I never thought I'd see the day when Elias Ainsworth fussed over home furnishings," Edward said with a grin. Elias's ears reddened. "A home should be comfortable," he muttered. "And welcoming," Sophia added, coming to his defense. "The curtains are a lovely touch." The look Elias gave her made her heart skip. It was a look of gratitude, yes, but something more, something that spoke of shared futures and unspoken hopes. After the meal, while Edward napped and Clara explored the garden with Mrs. Rodriguez, Elias took Sophia to see his prize horses. The corral held several fine animals, but his pride was clearly a magnificent black stallion who came trotting over when Elias whistled. "This is Midnight," he said, stroking the horse's sleek neck. "I raised him from a colt. He's the foundation of my breeding program." Sophia admired the animal's powerful build and intelligent eyes. "He's beautiful." "Would you like to ride him?" Elias asked. Sophia hesitated. "I haven't been on a horse in years and never one so magnificent. He's gentle with those he trusts." Elias held out his hand. "And he trusts me." With his help, Sophia found herself atop the massive stallion, her skirts arranged as modestly as possible over her legs. Elias walked beside them, leading Midnight in a slow circle around the corral. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking up at her. Sophia laughed, exhilarated by the height and the power of the animal beneath her. "Terrifying, wonderful. Like most worthwhile things in life," Elias said softly. Later, as they prepared to return to town, Elias pulled Sophia aside. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a scrap of velvet, was a silver hairpin topped with a delicate silver flower. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She would want you to have it." Touched beyond words, Sophia carefully lifted the pin. "Elias, I couldn't possibly, please," he said. "It would honor her memory." Unable to refuse, Sophia allowed him to take the pin and secure a loose strand of her hair. His fingers brushed against her temple, sending a shiver down her spine. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll treasure it." The ride back to town was filled with comfortable conversation and laughter, but beneath it all was a current of anticipation. Something had shifted between them, a threshold crossed. By the time they reached Redemption Creek, Sophia knew with certainty that her feelings for Elias had deepened into something she could no longer ignore. As summer progressed, Sophia and Elias fell into a comfortable routine. Sundays after church, they would often share dinner with Edward and Clara. Wednesday evenings he would escort her to meetings of the town's small literary society. On Saturdays, weather permitting, they would ride out to his ranch or picnic by the creek. Not everyone in town approved of their courtship. Sophia overheard whispers about Elias's heritage, and the school board chairman, Mr. Wilson, made a point of reminding her that teachers were expected to maintain impeccable reputations. "Some of the parents have expressed concern about your association with the Ainsworth man," Wilson said after a board meeting in late July. "Which parents?" Sophia asked coolly. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "That's not important. What matters is the example you set for the children." "I agree completely," Sophia replied. "I hope my example teaches them to judge people by their character and actions, not by rumors or prejudice." Wilson's face reddened. "Now see here, Miss Calloway, if you wish to dismiss me for spending time with a respected local rancher who attends church every Sunday and has never been in trouble with the law, you are welcome to try." Sophia gathered her papers. "But you might find it difficult to replace a qualified teacher willing to work for such modest wages in a remote town." The matter was dropped, but Sophia knew it wasn't forgotten. She told Elias about the conversation during their next ride to the ranch. "I don't want to cause problems for you," he said, concern etching lines around his eyes. "Your position in the community is strengthened by association with a man of integrity," she interrupted. "I won't let narrow-minded gossips dictate my heart, Elias." His expression softened. "Your heart." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes," she said simply. "My heart." Elias reined his horse to a stop, reached across the space between them, and took her hand. "Sophia Calloway, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known." Before she could respond, the crack of gunfire split the air. Elias's horse reared, nearly unseating him. He regained control quickly, scanning the landscape for the source of the shot. "Get down," he shouted, dismounting and pulling Sophia from her saddle. They crouched behind a large boulder as another shot ricocheted off the rock face above them. "Who's shooting at us?" Sophia whispered, fear clutching at her throat. "I don't know." Elias peered cautiously around the boulder. "Could be rustlers. I've lost a few head of cattle recently." "What do we do?" Elias withdrew a revolver from his saddle bag. "Stay here, keep low." "You can't go out there." Sophia grabbed his arm. "I need to get to higher ground, see who we're dealing with." He squeezed her hand. "I won't do anything foolish, I promise." Reluctantly, Sophia released him. Heart pounding, she watched as he moved stealthily from one point of cover to another, working his way up the rocky hillside. Minutes stretched like hours. Another shot rang out, followed by a man's angry shout. Then silence. Sophia jumped when a hand touched her shoulder. Elias had returned, a grim expression on his face. "It's Will Parker," he said. "Local troublemaker. Says I stole land that should have been his." "Did you?" "No, he tried to claim land that was already deeded to me through proper channels. He's been nursing a grudge ever since." Elias helped her to her feet. "Sheriff Matthews is riding this way, must have heard the shots from town. Parker's trussed up by his own horse." True to his word, the sheriff appeared minutes later. After hearing their account and collecting the sullen Parker, who sported a bloody nose courtesy of Elias's fist, Matthews tipped his hat to Sophia. "Sorry for the excitement, Miss Calloway. Parker's been a nuisance since he drifted into town last year. This ought to keep him locked up for a good while." When they were alone again, the gravity of what had happened hit Sophia. She began to tremble, delayed shock setting in. Elias enfolded her in his arms. "It's all right," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now." Sophia clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "For a moment I thought—" "I know," he pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "Sophia, life out here can be dangerous. Today was proof of that. If you want to reconsider what? Us." The word seemed to pain him. "No one would blame you if you decided a quiet teaching position back east would be safer than loving a man who faces the world's dangers with courage and honor," Sophia finished for him. "I don't want safe, Elias, I want real." Time seemed to suspend as he searched her face. Then, with deliberate tenderness, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Sophia responded, winding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something that made her dizzy with sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said hoarsely. "I think I have since I first saw you faint in the street." Sophia laughed softly. "Not my most dignified moment. You were beautiful even then." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sophia Calloway, will you marry me?" The question didn't surprise her. They had been moving toward this moment for months, but hearing it spoken aloud still made her heart soar. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Elias Ainsworth." Their second kiss was a promise, sealed under the vast Arizona sky with only the horses and distant mountains as witnesses. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Redemption Creek. Most townspeople offered congratulations, though some, like Mr. Wilson, maintained a cool civility that barely masked disapproval. Edward was ecstatic, and Clara was beside herself with joy at the prospect of her favorite teacher becoming her aunt. "When's the wedding?" The little girl asked during Sunday dinner at Edward's house the following weekend. Elias and Sophia exchanged glances. "We were thinking early September," Elias said, "before the school term gets too busy." "That's only 6 weeks away," Edward observed, raising an eyebrow. "There's no reason to wait," Sophia replied. At 25, she was past the age when most women married, and Elias, at 30, had established himself and his ranch. They had discussed it and agreed. A small, simple ceremony followed by a gathering at Edward's cafe was all they needed. The weeks before the wedding flew by in a whirlwind of preparations. Sophia ordered fabric from Haggerty's store and, with Mrs. Finch's help, sewed a wedding dress of ivory cotton with lace trim. Elias expanded the bedroom in his ranch house and added a small study where Sophia could grade papers and read. Not all the preparations went smoothly. A week before the wedding, Sophia received a letter from the school board. "They want me to resign," she told Elias that evening as they sat on the porch of her lodging house. "They say it's because married women should focus on their homes, but the timing makes their real objection clear." Elias's jaw tightened. "Wilson's doing, almost certainly." She handed him the letter. "But he's convinced 2 other board members to sign as well." Elias read the formal request with growing anger. "This is ridiculous. Your students adore you. Parents have told me how much their children have learned under your guidance." "Some parents," Sophia corrected. "Not all. What will you do?" Sophia had spent all day considering her options. "Fight," she said simply. "The school term starts in 3 weeks. They don't have time to find a qualified replacement. I'll attend the next board meeting and make my case." The meeting was scheduled for the following evening. Sophia dressed with particular care, choosing her most professional-looking dress and arranging her hair in a severe bun. Elias offered to accompany her, but she declined. "This is my battle," she told him. "I need to face them on my own." The 5-member school board was already assembled when Sophia entered the small room at the back of the church that served as their meeting place. Wilson sat at the head of the table, flanked by Mr. Peterson, a cattle broker, and Mr. Reynolds, the town banker. Mrs. Haggerty and Dr. Mitchell completed the board. "Miss Calloway," Wilson said, his tone formal. "We received your request to address the board regarding our letter." "Thank you for seeing me," Sophia replied, equally formal. She remained standing, facing them across the table. "I am here to respectfully decline your request for my resignation." Wilson's face reddened. "Miss Calloway, it is standard practice, in some places perhaps," she interrupted. "But there is no written policy in our school charter prohibiting married women from teaching." "I have reviewed the document thoroughly. There are concerns," Peterson interjected, "about your ability to manage both a household and a classroom." "I appreciate your concern for my well-being," Sophia said with careful politeness. "However, as I will be living just outside town and have no children yet to care for, I believe I can fulfill both roles adequately." There are also concerns, Wilson said, his voice dropping, about the example set by your choice of husband. And there it was, the real issue, finally spoken aloud. My fiancé is a respected rancher and businessman who contributes significantly to this community's economy, Sophia replied, keeping her voice level despite her rising anger. If you have specific concerns about his character, I suggest you state them plainly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, Mrs. Haggerty spoke up. For heaven's sake, Joshua, she said to Wilson, just say what you mean. You don't approve of Elias Ainsworth because his mother was part Apache. Wilson shifted in his seat. It's not just that. There's his past as a drifter, his connection to what? Dr. Mitchell interrupted. I've known Elias since he was born, delivered him myself. He's a fine man who served this country in the war and has built a successful ranch through honest hard work. The children, Wilson began. The children adore Miss Calloway, Mrs. Haggerty cut in. My grandson has learned more in 6 months under her guidance than in 2 years with Mr. Parker before her. And my daughter finally enjoys arithmetic, Dr. Mitchell added. Whatever personal prejudices you harbor, Wilson, they have no place in decisions about our school. Wilson looked to Reynolds for support, but the banker merely shrugged. I'm inclined to agree with Emma and Thomas, he said. Miss Calloway is an asset to this town. If she believes she can manage both marriage and teaching, I'm willing to trust her judgment. Realizing he was outnumbered, Wilson's shoulders slumped. Very well, he said stiffly. The request for resignation is withdrawn, but understand, Miss Calloway or Mrs. Ainsworth, as you'll soon be, that you will be held to the highest standards of conduct. As I have always held myself, Sophia replied evenly. Thank you for your time. Outside, Sophia leaned against the church wall, trembling with relief and residual anger. She had won this battle, but she knew Wilson's attitude represented a prejudice that wouldn't disappear overnight. When she told Elias about the meeting that evening, his expression was a mixture of pride and concern. You're remarkable, he said, but Wilson won't forgive this easily. He could make things difficult for you. Let him try, Sophia replied with more confidence than she felt. The majority of the board supports me, and more importantly, so do you. Elias pulled her into his arms. Always, he promised. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright. Sophia dressed in her new ivory gown with Mrs. Finch's help, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the silver hairpin Elias's mother's into her carefully arranged hair. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Finch said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Like a proper frontier bride. A knock at the door revealed Edward, who had offered to escort Sophia to the church in his brother's absence. His eyes widened when he saw her. My brother is a fortunate man, he said, offering his arm. Ready to become an Ainsworth. The church was filled with well-wishers, Sophia's students and their parents, ranchers who did business with Elias, townspeople who had come to respect them both. Even Mr. Wilson sat stiffly in a back pew, his presence a concession to civility if not enthusiasm. When Sophia entered on Edward's arm, her eyes immediately found Elias waiting at the altar. He wore a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. The look of wonder that transformed his features when he saw her made every challenge they had faced worthwhile. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple gold bands and traditional vows, their voices clear and certain in the hushed church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Elias's kiss was tender but thorough enough to elicit a few chuckles from the congregation. The celebration afterward at Edward's Cafe lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and food, speeches and laughter. Even those who had been skeptical of the match seemed won over by the obvious happiness of the couple. As the sun began to set, Elias led Sophia to the waiting wagon that would take them to their ranch, their home. Ready, Mrs. Ainsworth? He asked, helping her up to the seat. I've been ready since the day you caught me fainting in the street, she replied with a smile. The first months of marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Sophia learned to balance her teaching duties with running a household. Elias learned to share spaces that had been exclusively his. They both learned the rhythms of married life: when to speak, when to listen, when to compromise. There were challenges. Wilson continued to scrutinize Sophia's teaching, looking for any excuse to criticize. Some parents withdrew their children from school rather than have them taught by a woman married to a man of mixed heritage. But for every family that turned away, others stood firmly in support. The first snowfall of winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Sophia stood at the window of their bedroom, watching Elias chop wood for the stove, his breath clouding in the cold air. So much had changed in a year. She had arrived in Redemption Creek alone, seeking a place to belong. Now she had a husband, a home, a community not without its flaws but real and solid in hers. When Elias came inside, stomping snow from his boots, she met him with a kiss that quickly warmed them both. "What was that for?" he asked, pleasantly surprised. "For catching me when I fell," she said. "For loving me despite the complications, for giving me a home." Elias brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression solemn. "You gave me a home too, Sophia, not just this house, but here." He placed his hand over his heart. "I was a drifter even when I stopped moving, until you." As they stood together in the warmth of their kitchen, snow falling gently outside the window, Sophia knew that whatever challenges came their way, prejudice, hardship, the unpredictable nature of frontier life, they would face them together. In Elias's arms, she had found not just a husband, but a partner who valued her strength as much as her softness, her mind as much as her heart. And in loving him, she had found not just a place to belong, but a way to belong fully, honestly, completely herself. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal. The ranch flourished under their joint care, and Sophia's students excelled in their studies. Even Wilson had grudgingly acknowledged that marriage hadn't diminished her effectiveness as a teacher. One evening in April, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson, Sophia took Elias's hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "I have news," she said softly. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you certain?" She nodded, her smile radiant. "Dr. Mitchell confirmed it yesterday. We'll have a child by late October." Elias's expression transformed from shock to wonder to joy. He knelt before her, pressing his forehead against her still flat abdomen. "A child," he whispered. "Our child. Are you happy?" She asked, running her fingers through his dark hair. He looked up at her, eyes shining with unshed tears. "More than I ever thought possible." As the months passed and Sophia's body changed to accommodate their growing child, they planned and prepared. Elias built a cradle, carefully carving intricate patterns into the headboard. Sophia sewed tiny garments from soft flannel. Edward and Clara visited often, bringing gifts and advice. The school board agreed that Sophia could teach until the end of September, then resume her duties in January if she wished. Mrs. Rodriguez offered to help with the baby when Sophia returned to teaching, an arrangement that eased Sophia's concerns about balancing her dual roles. On a crisp October morning, after a night of labor attended by Dr. Mitchell and Mrs. Rodriguez, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Elias, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout the ordeal, wept openly when the doctor placed his daughter in his arms. "She's perfect," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." They named her Elias Marie Ainsworth, after both their mothers. Elias had Elias's dark hair and Sophia's clear blue eyes. From her first days, she showed a determination that made both parents laugh in recognition. "She'll be strong," Elias predicted, watching their daughter grasp his finger with surprising force. "A true frontier woman, with a mind of her own," Sophia agreed. "Heaven help her teachers." Life settled into new patterns around Elias's needs. Elias took on more of the household duties so Sophia could rest and recover. When she returned to teaching in January, he often brought Elias to the schoolhouse at midday so Sophia could nurse her. The sight of the rugged rancher carefully cradling his infant daughter became a familiar one in Redemption Creek. As Elias grew from infant to toddler, their family life evolved. Elias expanded the house, adding a nursery and a larger kitchen. Sophia's reputation as a teacher continued to grow, with families from outlying areas sometimes boarding their children in town specifically so they could attend her classes. The prejudice they had faced early in their marriage didn't disappear entirely, but it diminished as people witnessed their quiet dignity and commitment to the community. Even Wilson eventually thawed, especially after Elias helped save his prized horses during a stable fire. 5 years after their wedding, Sophia gave birth to their second child, a son they named Thomas Edward. Elias, now a precocious 5-year-old who already read at a 3rd-grade level, took her role as big sister very seriously. "I will teach him everything," she solemnly informed her parents. "Reading and horses and how to be brave." "I believe you will," Sophia said, watching her daughter gently stroke her brother's downy head on clear evenings. The family would often sit on their porch watching the sunset. Elias would tell stories of his cattle driving days, carefully edited for young ears, while Sophia pointed out constellations in the darkening sky. Elias would ask endless questions, and even baby Thomas seemed to listen, his dark eyes wide and attentive. During one such evening, as the children dozed against their parents, Elias took Sophia's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming west, marrying me, taking on all the challenges that came with those choices?" Sophia considered the question, not because she was uncertain of her answer, but because she wanted him to know she had truly reflected on it. "Not for a single moment," she finally replied. "Every choice led me here, to this life, these children, you. How could I regret the path that brought me such happiness?" Elias's smile in the fading light was tender. "You know, that day when I saw you faint in the street for the 2nd time, and I said you're not falling again, I had no idea I was speaking to my future. And I had no idea that falling would lead to flying," Sophia said, leaning her head against his shoulder as their children slept peacefully between them. Above them, the first stars appeared in the vast Arizona sky, witnesses to a love that had overcome prejudice, distance, and the harshness of frontier life. A love that had built not just a home, but a legacy that would endure in their children and the community they had helped to shape. In the years that followed, Redemption Creek grew from a small frontier town into a respectable community. The Ainsworth Ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Sophia eventually became the school principal, overseeing 3 teachers in a newly built 2-story schoolhouse. Elias followed in her mother's footsteps, attending a teacher's college in Denver before returning to Arizona to teach. Thomas inherited his father's affinity for horses, developing a breeding program that produced some of the finest stock in the Southwest. And through it all, Elias and Sophia remained each other's anchors, partners in love and life, their bond strengthened by every challenge they faced together. Their story became part of local lore, a testament to the power of love to overcome boundaries and build something enduring on the American frontier. For Sophia, who had once sought merely a place to belong, and for Elias, who had once been a drifter even on his own land, their greatest achievement was the family they created, not just their children, but the extended family of friends, neighbors, and students whose lives they touched. And it had all begun with a moment of weakness, a helping hand, and words that would prove prophetic. "You're not falling again." Indeed, she never did, for in Elias's love, Sophia had found not a fall but a flight into a future brighter than either could have imagined alone.